Seller leads are a little more challenging than just buying a buyer lead. Driving listings is a little bit harder than just holding an open house. It's a lot more transactional. There's a lot more due diligence from the sellers. So when you want to get to predictable seller lead generation, the first place it starts is building this really rich database of homeowners and starting to incubate them and build this messaging around them of providing them value. And then ultimately over time, you will start to create a lot of predictability on the listings side of the business.
It's Greg Harrelson here with the Level Up podcast. And of course, I got another guest that I'm excited to bring to you today. Our guest today is a little bit different in the sense of we're going to talk tech today more than talk, real estate agent strategy. Of course, when we talk tech around the real estate business, I'm sure there'll be some tactics and some strategies that'll kind of, just come to the conversation. But I really want to bring this guest to you to share with you something that I'm excited about, something that I've actually went 100% into, and I took a little bit of a risk on it, and I decided to go 100% into it, and all of a sudden it's having some really good payoffs for me. So with that being said, I want to introduce to you Ryan Young with Fello. Ryan is a co-founder of a new technology called Fello. I'm going to suggest multiple times probably that you check it out. I will say that I'm not an owner. I'm not a principal in any way. So if you check it out, it's kind of, it's just based on my recommendation and my personal usage. But Ryan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Obviously, we've had amazing conversations, and now I'm excited to be able to actually talk to an audience, have a conversation where, there's more than just you and I essentially listening.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of, one-on-one conversations and a lot of brainstorming. And, I'm picking your brain on what were you thinking? And then I'm like, okay, now that I know what you're thinking, well, this is what I'm thinking. And we just kind of build off each other. And I have a feeling the same thing's going to happen today. I think that just seems to be the pattern that you and I have. But I am very impressed. Listen, my audience for you, that I don't say things that I don't mean, and I don't come on here and I don't remember, Ryan, the last time I brought anybody on from a tech company, because, I use a lot of tech, but there's not a lot of them that are, to me, have done anything so far outside of the box of what like their neighbor did. It's like they created just a little bit better of a widget, and whatnot. But I'm very impressed with what you guys done here. And I guess I'm going to ask you two questions, but you answer, in the order. The first question is kind of, can you describe what Fello is? But I also want to then go into what I think is more important is, can you share with us what problem did you identify in the industry that inspired you to kind of build out this Fello tech? So that a lot of audience probably doesn't know what Fello is. Could give us a little brief idea of what it is, and I want to know what problem you saw out there that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and I think just before I even talk about Fello, I just I want to let the audience know my background. So we launched Fello 12 months ago, right? But before that, I owned and operated a real estate team in Northeast Ohio outside of Cleveland called the Young Team. We, in 2023, were named the number 15 large team by Real Trends, number 1 in the state of Ohio. And what's interesting about our team historically over the past 4 years or so has sold about 500 to 600 homes a year. But we only have 13 agents on our team. And we have always been this listing-based business. When you have a team where the average team member sells about 40, 45 homes a year, it's hard to do that and scale with being buyer heavy. So I say that because I've been in your shoes. I'm still in your shoes. The Young Team is still, alive and well, and we're dealing with the uniqueness of the market that we're currently in, and we're evolving and adapting and learning. But I always like to, let the audience know that I'm actually wearing the same shoes that you are, right? I've sold homes, when I was selling 110, 120 listings myself. I understand some of the pain points that we deal with in our industry. And although I'm labeled a tech CEO, I'm really just a real estate guy. And I'm fortunate enough to surround myself with really smart tech people that view and observe a lot of the pain points that the young team faces, and that a lot of the other top leaders in the industry like Greg and others who I've just been a part of these networks with, we've been able to gather feedback and understand what's happening in the business from really firsthand experience. So it's not like we're so removed and isolated sitting in, Tech Valley, right? And building products that we think are, we can monetize to an industry. It's really, we're working very closely with my team and with our other top teams to say, how can we solve these pain points and problems? So I just always like to throw that out there. I'm actually one of us. And I think that's really important to start off. Fello is interesting. Fello is focused on it. It's funny because me and Greg were talking before, and we were talking about the coined words seller lead generation, right? And when you tie something to lead generation, it's what we originally set out to do. What it's really evolved and expanded into is this platform that is really focused on lead generation as one component, but it's really seller marketing based. It's data driven. And the whole goal is to help basically teams, individual agents generate more listings. And we found multiple channels where we feel like that really hasn't been utilized in people's businesses. So when it comes to all things seller focused, homeowner focused, listings driven, it really is what Fello's umbrella is what we're focused on.
Yeah, that's good. I think I'm going to kind of go back to one of the things that you started off with. I think that's one of the reasons, Ryan, the fact that you've been in the business and you've done a lot of business, built a really nice team. I think that's one of the reasons why when we talk, we really relate very well, because it seems like we start off talking about tech, but then it really becomes a conversation from agent up to tech.
Right.
Versus a lot of tech companies are tech down to agent. And there's a disconnect between the tech language and the agent language. And it's really hard to connect that, right? It's like somebody's speaking a Mandarin and someone else is speaking, Spanish, and like no one's really getting it whatnot. But you do speak the same language.
Well, and with that, and just really quick with that, what's really interesting, because I'm still close to the young team. I own 100% of it. It's my baby, right? And there's 35 people that are a part of the young team right now that rely on me. And whenever I'm talking to our chief product officer or chief technical officer, and they're talking about our product roadmap, right? If I don't get excited, I can't just detach emotionally from the young team. It's my baby. It's what I've built over the last 13 years. When we're talking about product roadmap and future, vision of the product and what we're building, if I don't feel some sort of way wearing my young team hat, we immediately are tweaking that vision or the direction we are building, right? So it's like I have to get excited, like, wow, that actually is a major pain point for us right now. That's something we've really struggled with. How quick can we get this built? And it's always along that line of like, when I'm like, how quick can we launch this? Because I know this will immediately solve a problem. That's when I get really excited about the direction we continue to take our product.
Yeah. So let's talk about problem. Not to be negative, but what problem did your team identify in the industry that inspired you to say, hey, we've got to solve this problem for agents? And then, of course, there comes Fello. So what problem do you feel like you're solving?
So I feel like we're solving a couple problems. The first one is, I feel like our industry is lopsided on how we position and build our businesses. I feel like it's a very buyer heavy business. I feel like if you look at most people's marketing spends or lead generation efforts, it's buyer focused. One of the things that I just find is really interesting is when you get into the business and you really want to start running, the first thing you do is you do open houses to find buyers. You maybe buy Zillow leads or Realtor.com leads or digital. These are all what's accessible. The buyer calls you, they reach out, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you get into this trap of like building this buyer-based business. It's the easiest way, right? To me, I think that's a huge problem. I think it's very hard foundationally to scale when you are building a buyer-based business, unless you're building it with a 10-year mindset of eventually all these buyers are going to become sellers. But from an economic standpoint or financial or profitability standpoint, I think a lot of agents are misguided on how they start their businesses foundationally with a buyer-first mindset, right? I think the other challenge is a lot of agents that I talk to, the first question I ask them is, how big is your database? And they so proudly, and this is one of the things I loved about when I talked with you, they so proudly say, I got 10,000, 4,000, 40,000, 150,000 contacts in my database. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. How many of those are local homeowners, right? And they like look at me like I'm crazy, right? They're like, well, how would I ever know that? Why? Who knows who owns homes in their database? It's like, that's a problem, right? Like we know how many contacts we have. We have a first name, a last name, a phone number, and an email, but there's no intentionality around where do these people in our databases actually live? Do they own the home that they actually live in? Is that area that they live in part of our serviceable market? And so there's very little intentionality around database strategy, focusing around homeowners. And when you want to really get to having what I would consider as predictable seller lead generation, seller leads are a little more challenging than just buying a buyer lead, right? Driving listings is a little bit harder than just holding an open house. It's a lot more transactional. There's a lot more due diligence from the sellers. So when you want to get to predictable seller lead generation, the first place it starts is building this really rich database of homeowners and starting to incubate them and build this messaging around them of providing them value. And then ultimately over time, you will start to create a lot of predictability on the listings side of the business. And it's just something that it's been very eye-opening to see that's really not there.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember some of those early conversations we had, and we were talking about the size of our database. And I said, well, listen, I just want you to know all of my database that I'm going to upload, they're all documented property owners. I already know that. There's not going to be one that I load in that's not a documented property owner. And, and look, I've been doing that for a long time. So I surely don't want to allude to that that's what you have to have in order for Fello to work good. But because I had been building my business that way for so many years, that's when I immediately says, oh my gosh, you've really got something here. You've got something.
100%. And it's just the opposite. It's the Fello helps the people. We help the people that do. You kind of have a cheat code, a head start versus some of the clients that we work with, right? But what Fello really is focused on is converting those buyer leads into seller leads, right?
Can you tell us how that happens? I want the audience needs to know that, because I don't think you telling us that one liner. I don't think that's enough. Tell us how that happens.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find is interesting is we get buyer leads. Like I said, you can turn on buyer leads really quickly. PPC, we can get over inundated. Facebook leads, right? They're low cost, right? They're ways to fill our database, but you're filling it with I would consider it like weak soil, So one of the things that we're really passionate about, and I've been doing this with my real estate team for a long time, and we've just provided automation around it. Every buyer lead that you generate, we immediately move into a seller funnel. Okay. So you're going to start sending them messaging about, hey, would you like to see homes for sale? And what areas are you looking to buy in? What we do is we also automate a very subtle message that goes out to them and basically says, are you curious what your home is worth? Right now, the home is worth. The reason why we are really bullish on the home value opportunity to that type of prospect is because it's a very subtle, soft message. It's non-invasive. It's focused on them. It's not me selling myself, right? And what we found is we've started to actually pull buyer leads that essentially inquired on looking at a property. We start to pull them into this seller funnel. This is the entry point, right? Of, are you curious what your home's worth, to get them into the funnel. And now the goal is essentially, once we do so, to start working them down the funnel to essentially becoming higher intent. And I think the biggest aha that we've seen with a lot of our clients is, I've got all these leads in my database. I generate 500 buyer leads a month, 100 buyer leads a month, whatever it is. And they start seeing how we start converting those old leads. We get calls from people that I had a lead from 2016, realtor.com, Zillow lead, whatever it is. And they actually just raise their hand and they want to sell their $700,000 property. And I think we think just because a buyer lead is just that, right? I think we're afraid to bring some of the messaging around to saying, do you have a home to sell? Are you curious what your home is worth? And so what we're doing is we're basically running that parallel funnel while you're working on all your buyer messaging, selling yourself, learning more about whatever their buyer needs are, discovery, starting to very slowly get them into that top of funnel on the sell side.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll share some of the way I look at it too, is in our industry, I think, as there's been a lot of predictive analytics. You got SmartZip, there's offers.com, there's these companies out there, and all the predictive analytics has been around the selling side, the listing side, trying to predict based on, an algorithm, their age of their children, divorce, all these different parameters as to what's the probability of somebody selling. But there hasn't been any programs really built around the buyers and predictive analytics. Now, I'm not saying that you're necessarily making predictions with these buyers, but I do find it fascinating. If I was to put a buyer, like I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, I put up some of my buyers, which, by the way, our buyers, a lot of them are transplanting in from another state. All of a sudden, we put a buyer into Fello, and next thing you know, 3 months later, after the buyer's kind of not showing as much interest, 3 months later, all of a sudden we get a notification that this one buyer lead, this old buyer lead, actually just inquired about what their property was worth in Connecticut.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it's oh, okay. So what does that tell me? That tells me that, hey, maybe they're warming up and getting a little bit more towards the bottom of the funnel as a buyer for Myrtle Beach, because they're starting to maybe inquire what they can sell their home for in Connecticut. So I want that bit of intelligence to trigger me following up with that buyer. Or what's better is even this is, well, I don't know if this is better or worse, actually, is that same buyer 3 months later, after I haven't talked to them in a while, now all of a sudden I get a notification, or I can see in my dashboard that they just listed their property in Connecticut. Not only can I see that they hit a button and inquired about their value, they actually, because Fello's connected to the MLSs and it's pulling in all that data, it's actually matching my contacts with somebody that has listed. So if I've got an old buyer that just listed in Connecticut, you bet I better call that buyer, because that buyer's about ready to come down to Myrtle Beach and buy. And it doesn't matter if you're in a Myrtle Beach market where you're dealing with people that live out of the area, or whether it's local, it's the same thing. And again, that's one of the things that a problem that I feel like you're solving is because we as agents collect so many leads, we cannot manage them. And therefore, we don't know who to call and when to call. And you're actually kind of giving us that guidance.
Yeah. And I think what's so important with what you said is, we have this whole propensity logic built in, and it's going to continue to get better and better. The propensity logic is essentially consumer data, right? We feel like it's important when you're looking at your list or you're looking at the prospects in your database to say who's been in their home for over X amount of years, or who doesn't have a mortgage on their property. So one of the nice things with Fello is we have, MLS data, public record data, mortgage data. So you now have this visibility into, if you want to look at your entire database by people that don't have mortgages on their homes, you can sort your entire database by that, or people that have been in their home for over 10 years or have less than a 50% loan to value, or have seen double the appreciation since they've been in there, or whatever it is, right? But the key is, and where a lot of those other companies, in my opinion, miss the opportunity, and they actually now plug nicely into Fello. Fello also takes the consumer behavior, right? So we're not just taking consumer data. That's all good and well, but that's still a cold list, although it's predictive, right? Yeah. When you can actually layer behavior on top of it, of saying this person is engaging. They're not only high intent based off of data, their kids just graduated, they've been in their house 25 years, they just paid their mortgage off, right? Their house has appreciated more than doubled it since they bought it, but they also are clicking on their dashboard. multiple times. And we're seeing an increase in frequency on how they're opening their emails, right? That's where the money is made. And what's nice about it is the money is made because you have to choose, especially teams of our sizes, right? You have a bigger business than I do, but you have so many opportunities sitting in your database. You have to pick and choose where you invest your dollars to market to those people and where you invest your sales effort. And so it's like, if I had to look at your entire database and say, who would you rather call? People that have been in their home for seller lead generation, people that have been in their home for a year or less, or people that have been in their home for over 10 years, you're going to say, well, obviously people that have been in their homes over 10 years are more likely to sell. People that have a 3% interest rate or people that have a 6% interest rate, right? People that, and we just keep doing this condition-based, kind of ideology of like, that's where you should be investing your efforts. And that's where we found there's just so much opportunity sitting in front of us. And then to your point about the real sellers tab that we like to call it, one of the biggest things that I think we did was when we launched Fello 12 months ago, we were really helping people generate a significant amount of activity in the top of funnel, right? People raising their hand saying, I'm curious what my home's worth. Maybe I'd like a professional CMA. So I was getting a lot of feedback from our top users and saying, I love this. This is amazing. I'm resuscitating leads from 6 years ago. Buyer leads, $10 PPC buyer leads are now, saying they, raising their hand. But when we talk to them, everyone's just saying they're just curious, right? Mm-hmm. And so we said, interesting, let's talk about the scripts you're using. What's your approach to follow up with them? And we found that everyone was different. Some people would text them. They'd have an automated text. Some people would call them 8 times, 10 days of pain, whatever it is. But there's no consistency in the follow-up. So we said, okay, this is something that I think really no one else is doing. What about if we go below the funnel, because we have the MLS data and public record data, and let's actually document and scan that database every single day and scan every single address every day in your database. And let's notify you in real time when any address goes to market, whether with or without you, or sells off market. And I think this is where the light bulb went off for a lot of our clients of like, we're always looking at what's your conversion on PPC leads or what's your conversion on this lead. And what they're looking at is, here's how many leads I generated and here's how many I actually closed, right? I generated 100 leads. I closed 3 of them. My conversion's 3%. What no one really looks at is, because we don't have the visibility or accessibility to the data, is what's the actual conversion of those leads? I'm not saying your conversion, I'm saying the actual conversion.
Yeah, what's
now
convertible?
Let's look at what's convertible, and now what's happening is they're realizing, wait, the delta between what they're converting to what is actually converting is quite large. And so now we're starting to figure out ways that we can gamify getting a lift from 2% to 3%, 3% to 5%. But the key is awareness. And once you start seeing how many of these opportunities are actually going to market without you, all of a sudden, even the young team, we are changing some of our processes on how we're approaching lead generation, because it's just exposed so many of us on how many opportunities are being left on the table.
I'm doing the same thing, Ryan. I'm one thing I'm not changing is I'm not changing the fact that we take a proactive approach and we go find listings, right? But this is definitely making it more efficient and effective. Just to throw out one that you taught me on a recent video that you did was so this is for the audience to kind of get a visual of what we can do. So I can look in my database right now, and let's just say, because you actually have an expired tab, so you can tell me, everybody that is in my database that had their property on the market someday in the past, but it never sold, it expired. So I can see, hey, these people in this segment of my database is actually had thought about selling at one time, because I can see every one of them that's been on the market and expired. So then I just simply do a filter of all the people in my database that have been and expired, but have clicked on or opened up my email 4 times or more, or clicked 3 times or more within my email. So what I'm seeing is that there'll be 1 week that I have, a few people that are expired and they're starting to click. And then 2 weeks later, we do it again, and all of a sudden we see different people that have been expired and starting to click. And then what you brought to our attention was, it's like, hey, look, these people wanted to sell, they failed to sell, and now they're starting to inquire again on their own. That triggers a call. So with your system, Fello, once this gets built out and agents start really building those databases, I think the Fello agents or agents that are within the Fello platform, I don't think they will ever cold call again. I don't think they'll. I think there's no reason to go cold.
Yeah, I love that.
Now, and what are we going to call it? We're going to call it. So now we warm call.
Right.
Cold is where you know nothing about this person.
And they know nothing about you.
And they know nothing about you. So
with the opens and clicks, 100% with the opens and clicks, one of the things that's really important about Fello is it's completely white labeled and it's completely customizable, right? So we provide some parameters of like, here's what we would recommend from a template standpoint. But to Greg's point of, if they're opening emails from you, they're seeing your name and your brand, right, on those emails. If they're landing on your dashboard, they're seeing your name, your brand, and your customization of that dashboard. And I love that. It's like, and it's so true. There really is no such thing. When you start focusing on filtering your database by people that are interacting with you, you're going to have an expired where 100 people are calling them and they're over inundated about, hey, out of curiosity, I saw your home was off the market. What's your plans? Going through their entire script. Yours is, I just wanted to make sure that you're receiving the value that we're providing you. And you already know they are, right? But you're taking an angle of, I've been providing you value. They're all calling to take something, right? And when you focus on giving and providing value, all of a sudden it becomes attraction, right? And I love that because it's so funny when I look at just the young team. And this is why I love what I do, because that just kind of lit like a little bit of a, like the light kind of went off on something that we're doing. We're pretty heavy expired based team.
Yeah.
We leverage the expired tab. And what we found is what's nice, we're getting notified of whether listing appointments or leads that we generated from 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago that ended up listing with someone else. We lost the opportunity and now it didn't sell. Right. And so that's just such a warmer call or conversation, right? Versus the cold call out of the Vulcans, the Red X's, whatever it is, of just going on a dialer down the line. And so I love that. There is no such thing as a cold call anymore.
No, there shouldn't be. I mean, we should be moving away from that. And and I'm surely still, I believe in proactive lead generation. So when I say there should not be a cold call ever again, it doesn't mean that we won't be working, we won't be calling, it just means that the quality of the list of who we're calling is just leveled up to a whole nother level. In
which ultimately conversion should lift. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. Conversion should lift. Conversion should lift. So, a lot of tech. Well, what I don't do is I don't bring them on because I feel, and I'm very unfortunately, I guess I'm very judgmental about it. I have a strong opinion about a lot of things, especially in the real estate space. And maybe outside of real estate, I take a more passive approach. But I don't feature a lot of tech because I feel like they're selling a magic pill. Why is this not a magic pill?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing is I'm not, what is the just for men thing or what? I'm not only the client, I'm the president or something like that. I'm still the user. I'm still the avatar of who we are. So it's like one of those things. Like I still need to solve problems within my own organization. And as soon as you solve a problem, there's a new problem, right? Market's constantly changing, stuff like that. So I think while there have been some products historically that it comes in and it's great, and then all of a sudden it just kind of fizzles out. One of the things that's really important for us, because I'm a user, is I don't think in the 13 years I've been doing this, I've never got to a place in my business where I'm like, all right, we're good. Everything's fine. Like there's no more problems. There's no more pain points. It's like we are constantly evolving in the organization, the industry, the world, essentially. And I think because of that, Fello is always going to work closely with our agents and continue to see how the problems morph and how they, change and how we need to adapt and continue to keep building. And I just don't see, with what my experience in the industry has been over the past decade or so, I just don't see us ever getting to a place where it's like, all right, we've made it. We're good. We finally have solved all the problems. I just feel like we talked earlier about the DOJ stuff, and like there's all kinds of things that are completely changing in our industry, and we've just scratched the surface. So I'm excited to, although we feel like we've really helped solve a initial pain point, I think we really are kind of in the first inning of everything we're doing.
Yeah. I've seen a few other analytics for some other companies, that more lead companies,
Sure.
where they're selling leads. And this is something that I actually caught a lot of flack for in some of the social media channels where, I'm a big proponent on seller leads, generating seller leads online, like through methods like What's My Home Worth? And boy, as soon as you put that into like social media, then you're going to get blasted. Oh, those leads are terrible and blah, blah, blah. Right. And look, I understand this, that the majority of them are terrible, but I don't need the majority of them to be great for me to make a boatload of money. That's not, it's like, I mean, if I look at a Hall of Fame baseball player, I actually feel like when he got out 7 times out of 10, I could sit and say he's terrible. 7 times he gets out of 10. Only 3 times does he get on base. I'm like, that's all he needed to get to the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah.
The reason I bring this up was I've done my own testing over the last couple of years, as well as seen 2 other companies do testing on those type of seller leads. And what we found is about 10% of them will list in 12 months.
Yeah.
Which is completely against everyone's comments and beliefs about this. When you opened up Fello and you started showing what we were losing, I was so grateful for that, because the point is the fear of loss tends to be a stronger motivator than the opportunity for gain. And 100%. So the industry has been sitting here saying, you need to get seller leads, but that's the opportunity for gain. What you just did is you just showed the real loss, and that's getting people motivated. So I think that was a big move, Ryan, big move.
Well, and the funny thing is, and this is something that I have to work with on my own team. So I have what we call our listing partners call it an hour. And sometimes I focus a little bit too much on the things we lost, and it turns a little negative, right? It's something that I need to work on as a leader. Just like, it's like one of those things. Like we also need to celebrate the wins, and it's like there's a lot of wins that we've pulled out. We've converted 5-year-old leads to listings that have ended up driving more opportunities, and then they buy and all these things, right? So the funny thing, and it definitely hasn't backfired. It's been probably the biggest movement that we've seen in the industry since we launched it 30 days ago or so. But what is interesting, as soon as we tell people, I want to show you some data that we just launched, right? You have access to it, but let's talk through it. The first thing, they all of a sudden stop listening to me, and they start looking at every single opportunity that they lost. And they're like, I'm going to kill this person. He never called this person back. We never followed up with this person. And it's like, wait, let's take a deep breath. Yeah. Awareness is the first step, right? Like, and so it's just funny how our minds, and you're so spot on, is like, we are so much more intrigued or gravitate towards the loss, what we've lost, right? We also want to do this to leverage the wins. Like sometimes we lose focus that a listing that we just took was a lead that was created 3, 4, 6 years ago, And one of the things that Fello, although we kind of joke and coin lead generation, one of the funniest things about Fello is there's times where people say these leads suck. And it's like, we're not selling you new leads. Like they're your leads. We're helping you reconvert these opportunities and create hand raisers and create visibility and awareness and all these things. And I think then they realize like, oh yeah. And then once they see the real sellers, they're like, we suck. Like, that's the common thing. And what I'm just really passionate about is, and where we're moving the vision and the direction and expanding and evolving and iterating, is really on what we have found is the top of funnel, is easy, right? We can create as much top of funnel activity as someone wants. To your point about the 10%, well, that means that you essentially, how much time do you want to spend on the 90% versus the 10%? What we're really focused on is the middle of funnel now. And if what I mean by that is, if I can help you acknowledge who the 10% are going to be before the 10% is the 10%, so that you can focus less time on the 90, right? And focus more time on the 10%. Now all of a sudden you have a much better balanced business. You're much more profitable. It's like, that's where a lot of our focus is going, because we're seeing what the conversion is. And I think you're so spot on with, how you're approaching it, of like 10%. If you can guarantee me 10% of the leads we generate are going to turn into listings within 12 months, wildly profitable business. There are very few people in the industry that see that type of conversion. I think so many people focus on the 90% and they forget about the 10%, because the 90% almost like, we get so engulfed into it that it almost has like a stigma on the actual good stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's just, okay, I think some of us as leaders feel like we finally have data to confirm what we've been coaching. And then what we did is we get excited about, I told you so. And I'm settled down now. I'm settled. I'm settling down. I'm chilling out and have switched it from, holy cow, I didn't realize how much opportunity I really have. I just pulled up my Fello account and it just triggered me again. So I just said I'm getting better, but I'm just getting worse as we're speaking. So when I look up real sellers in my account and I go to reports, okay. Now, when I go to reports on real sellers, can you tell me, if you have it by memory, can you tell me what is the time frame that when you give me the total opportunities that I lost, what was the time frame on that?
Yeah, so I'm looking at, it's basically since April. So what's interesting is, remember, because we're scanning every address, we are making an assumption, though. Full disclosure, we're making an assumption that the address that you have in your database is accurate to whoever it's attached to. Okay. Sure. So when I'm looking at the amount of opportunities in your real sellers since April, and you see
$555 million worth of volume. Now, with full disclosure, I have lots of people in Fello. So this is not a thousand size of 1,000 database. And I'm claiming, or Fello has identified, that we lost opportunity was $555 million worth of volume. For some of you listening, you might say that's an absurd number. It's probably not that far off, considering, the operation that I'm running and how I'm implementing and integrating with Fello.
Well, and here's what's also interesting is, so I just also threw in on the contacts tab under real sellers, you have essentially without duplicates, 1,405 records. But then some people will say like, well, some of these leads seem like they're coming out of our market. It's like, all right, well, let's identify how many of those leads are in the state of South Carolina, right? And of the 1,405, 1,254 are in your actual serviceable market, right? Yeah. So it's funny because like, I think a lot of our agents give us like anecdotal feedback, right? Like, they're all out of our market. It's like, they're all out of our market. Yeah. Well, a lot of them are out of our market. Well, actually, only 180 out of the 1,400 were out of our market, which means 1,254 were in our market. And so this allows you to really get much more data. The conversations become a lot more data driven. And it's hard for our agents who feel like the home value leads are really low intent. Well, that's interesting. 55 of those home value leads in the past 6 months have already listed their home. Well, the cash offer leads, they just want a cash offer. They don't really want to list their home, or whatever it is. Well, that's interesting, because I can actually show you the amount of retail people that said they wanted the cash offer. These people didn't sell off market. We have those too. We have that data, and it looks like 8% actually did sell their home off market. But that means 92% did. We're getting outscripted by the consumer. And I think that's probably been the biggest aha for our team. When these real sellers happen, And what we've done is we've actually moved our agents into the platform because we want them to have ownership of the opportunities. Originally, our team had a pond mindset of like push everything into the pond. It's first to claim. What was happening was, especially with the real sellers, kind of opened our eyes up to it. I would go after we got this retroactive data of saying, look at all these opportunities we lost. And we kind of went through one by one. And everyone was like, well, I called them once, and then I called them and I called them, but they never picked up. When there's an actual ownership of it, there's no one to point the finger. And it's what we found was we go through this cadence of let's look at this opportunity. First, let's go into your CRM. Did you follow our process of follow-up, right? And if they did, it's like, okay, good, great job. If they never answer the phone, if they never respond to a text, I'm going to applaud my team member for following our process. Now we're going to constantly analyze our process and see if that's the most optimized way to reach out with them, right? Then the next piece of it is, did you get them on the phone? All right, you did. Let's listen to the conversation because either you set the appointment or you didn't. What we found was we were having conversations with a lot of people and they were saying they were just curious or they didn't want to list until Q1 or smoke screens, right? And so now we can go back and be like, look, here's the opportunity. You never provided any value in the conversation. You took the homeowner's responses. We're just curious as a way off the phone. You hung up within a minute and a half. You said, great, if there's anything we could do, just be in touch, right? There was no close. There was no trial close. There was no providing anything of offering anything of value. So then it's like, all right, now let's segment the people that we actually talked to but didn't set appointments versus the ones we did. Then the last piece of it is the people that we set appointments on. And what was really eye-opening was we had probably 20 people or so in what we consider consideration, meaning we went on the appointment. We're waiting for them to make a decision, right? Some of these people said they're interviewing other agents or they have to do some things around the house or they don't want to list until spring. That already listed their home and my agents didn't have any idea, right? So you can work your way down every one of these real sellers in real time of saying, let's use this as a educational or learning experience, right? Of how do we make sure that we increase conversion based off of where we went wrong in the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, man, I tell you what, I know that there's a lot there for the audience. So I really appreciate you, sharing, and I look forward to continuing to grow our relationship because I'm really, really in this system on a daily basis, trying to understand it better, coming up with our best practices, and I definitely want to keep the relationship so we can continue to trade. For those of you, that want to check out Fello, I'll definitely put a link, and Ryan gave me a link that has a discount attached to it for like the setup fee. I think it's a few $100s off of the setup fee or whatnot. Again, I'll put that there as a resource. At the least, I would urge everybody to at least do a demo so you can see. I predict if you do a demo with Fello, I predict that you'll either sign up or you won't. But what I really will predict is this: you're going to learn something about where this industry is moving and in relation to seller leads. And right now with this DOJ, this class action suit, there's a lot of buzz about buyer agents are going out of business. I don't believe that. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a lot of buzz out there, and there's going to be a very fast movement towards people like going after listings a little bit more aggressively. And with that, let me tell you what's going to come next. All these little pop-up so-called tech companies and pop-up so-called coaches is going to try to sell you a magic pill on how to get listings. Stay away from that stuff. And that's why I'm bringing Fello on, is not only because I like Fello and I'm committed to working with them as a user, but I'm also trying to do my best for the industry right now to say, beware. There is going to be a new movement in coaches that are not really that good. And there's going to be a movement in tech that's not really that good, that's going to try to get your dollars as quick as they can because they know everybody's afraid that the buyer side's going to go away. The seller side's going to be where it is. You're going to get taken advantage of. So be careful who you align with. I suggest you at least do a demo on Fello. Any final thoughts, Ryan?
Just to your point, look, we're super grateful for you and your participation. And it seems like just yesterday we were in Palm Springs, and I was grabbing a coffee at like 6 a.m. and Greg was already in there, probably been in there for an hour or so. We spent maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours just, talking, strategizing, stuff like that. And so I'm just super grateful for your participation and the way you're approaching this. And, you're a champion user of the product. And so we continue to ask for your feedback, and we want the ideas and the pain points and stuff like that. For the listeners, make sure you attach yourself through Greg. We have $300 off your onboarding, and on our team and business account, a 20% off going through, making sure that you essentially reference him. The reason why this is important to us is Greg continues to be a champion user of ours, and we want to lean on him and all his feedback and how he's leveraging it and using Fello. And the more essentially he's building this community of fellow users, the more we're participating and leaning into providing value to those people through Greg. So I can't say thank you enough. Once again, I love working with you guys, and it's nice. We are so aligned on the vision of the business and how we approach business. And so it's just refreshing every time we have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you. And thanks for doing this early in the morning. I do appreciate that. All right, everybody. So if you enjoyed this, episode, please, like, subscribe and whatnot, forward it to somebody else. If you didn't, please leave a comment on that too. I'm cool with that. I'd love the feedback. So Ryan, I'm sure we'll be, I wouldn't be surprised if I text you in the next couple of days, because I'm going to have an idea and I'm like, Ryan, what do you think about this? So let's keep that going. And if
that's what fuels me. That's what fuels me, so bring it.
And you lean on me if I can do anything for you. Thank you, sir.
I love it. Thank you. Appreciate it.